Well, it started because John wanted a more traditional wedding. I would have been happy probably with a justice of the peace or the way my spirituality kind of was at the time, and so he wanted a more traditional wedding. So we went Jewish, and it was great, and it really caused me to get more involved with the community, of the Jewish community. Up until then I hadn't been all that involved, but something about being a married couple within the synagogue, and I ended up on the board, so serving the board, so that happened at around that time. I had some free time at the time because I was laid off, so it's helped me sort of give back to the community and things like that at the time. So that's kind of how I'd have to say I have my religious experience is sort of before John and after John, I'd have to say. So.
And John, why was it important, describe why you wanted to have more of a religious ceremony for your wedding?
It just seems that the point of a wedding is to have significance, to have symbolism, to have to celebrate with people who you love, and it seemed like it would have a lot more significance and better memories if we had that sort of cultural background of having a religious wedding.
Describe your religious background. How would you describe yourself?
I was raised Catholic and went to Catholic school and come from a pretty devout Catholic family. I think somewhere along the way I started to question some of the things that the church taught, and some things didn't sit right with me, and I just became harder and harder to sort of swallow the doctrine and to take that leap of faith that some of the things that happened and the inconsistencies, and is it an eye for an eye or turn the other cheek, and I took a class in college in world religions where they pointed out a lot of the history of how the Bible was evolved, and they spoke about how a lot of the New Testament actually was derived from the Babylonian creation myths, and earlier accounts of the Genesis said in the beginning God created the Tiamat, and that instead of the water, and it came from the Babylonian god of the sea. And when you start to realize that this is a human construction, and it comes, it came from somewhere. It wasn't just God giving people the words and them appearing on tablets. It actually made more sense that people sort of created these texts over time. It became hard to believe them literally. But I think that since then I've come to accept that they're important, and I can still consider myself a Catholic by looking at these texts, these books, metaphorically. And I've come to believe that's even the way they were intended, and that's the way they should be viewed. And when we look at her religion and my religion, that way they can complement each other instead of presenting a problem.
Nancy,
Yeah.
describe your background.
My background, I was raised very Jewish, kind of similar to John, I'd have to say, almost equivalent. I didn't go to a Jewish day school, but I was involved I went to Hebrew school, I had a bat mitzvah, was involved in youth leadership all through high school, and pretty much standard kind of up until, I was never one to be religiously drawn to it. Maybe it's something about ceremony and mass, but I never liked that part of it, going to services and all that kind of stuff. And so I evolved in college into sort of exploring other spiritualities and finding my own, and kind of calling it a patchwork spirituality at the time. I was learning about different types of religions, and that kind of continued on and on. And when I met John, I was probably at the peak of it, where I was exploring Joseph Campbell and the idea that all religions really are the same and are the same at the core. And I'd have to say that's probably as accurate a description of my current belief system from a spiritual perspective. But I'd say culturally, I'd have to identify pretty strongly as Jewish still. Being in a small town has actually probably helped me shape that more clearer than had I personally grown up in a larger city, because I would have probably not been as nearly as involved as you are in a smaller town, because there's less of you and you get to know everybody a lot better, and it's a different experience here than it would be in a bigger city. So multiple things have shaped it. I find that it's important to have sort of a religious structure as a kid. It's sort of an easy way to be able to answer the question, do you believe in God? What's in, easy, something that you can then repeat whether or not you know whether you believe it or not. So I guess I always felt that I believe a religious education is a good thing up to a certain point, and then kind of let her choose as she gets older and finds her own way, like kind of how I did. And I always wanted it to be Jewish. I don't think I would have felt as comfortable going to Catholic school, so it worked out.
Growing up, for me, church was, a lot of the activities were fun. Certainly the holidays were fun. The friends we made at church were important. Even attending the services, they're memories. And going to lunch on Sundays after church and having a big meal, they're just kind of, culturally they're important. And I think that I want Lorelei to have that experience.
I always anticipated being very supportive of somebody else's faith if I were to intermarried. And, I'm always happy to go to Mass or Easter or whatever he might want to do. And the opportunity hasn't necessarily arisen, but I hope he knows that that's always, happily do it. We certainly live a more Jewish life. If we were to live any kind of, organized religion, it's definitely a Jewish life.
I think the reason, part of the reason for that is just the fact that Jewish community is so small, and they really do need, our participation.
And he loves cursing Pharaoh. It's just something that he enjoys doing. So I think he enjoys it. I'm happy. I'm so thrilled to have.
We're getting what we want out of the synagogue. It's fun. It's a close-knit community. The people there are great people who care about us and care about our kid. I like the community there, and that's more important to me than the dogma, frankly. And I think it's just a matter of perspective. Why is it so important that the story actually happened exactly the way it's written? The important thing is that this story was written to teach a lesson, and she's read books on Christianity and been interested in them, with the Gnostic Gospels, and I'm interested in learning about the stories in Judaism when we go to the high holidays and services.
And certainly when I was writing for Lilith, kind of the Jewish way of being in the modern world, we get the Chabad Times comes in the mail, and but also I think that is important, that at the core we believe we're very aligned.